Welcome to show 35 of A Victim Bites Back. Those of you who've watched from the very beginning will remember probably that back in February I arrived in the south of France with a car, having been all the way through France, Spain and Morocco, and returning, left my car here and flew back to London for a couple of months' work and other things. Well, I do this every summer, sometimes twice or even 3 times, and I much prefer not flying. I hate flying these days. Airports are so unpleasant, and it takes forever getting to the airport and then back in from the other end, and they're so appalling there. They make you take your shoes off, they empty your handbags, they're just absolutely vile. And so I really avoid air travel if I possibly can. And on the other hand, I absolutely love traveling on the train. And the train from the south of France up to Paris, and then through Paris, across Paris to the Gare du Nord, and on to the Eurostar and to London, means you get home at about the same time as you would flying, with all the travel to and from the airports and everything. But it's a much, much nicer way to travel. So this episode is my travels to and from London from the south of France. Before I go, I must say thank you to the hundreds of people who, after last week's episode, contacted me and said, no, please keep doing A Victim Strikes Back. I'm not yet convinced, so keep spreading the word and keep telling me if you want me to do more. But also about the transgender issue and my complaining about people mutilating themselves in order to change gender or sex. I really do feel that's absurd. I've got to say I'm not convinced at all by the people who say they want to do it. It's to me much the same as saying I really don't like having brown eyes. I want blue eyes, but instead of wearing contact lenses, I'm actually having an operation to change your eyes. Mad. Or racism, which in a way is the same kind of thing. People who say, no, I don't like being white, I want to be black, I'll have a skin transplant. Would they be bonkers? They would be absolutely bonkers. Somebody like me, for example, who's in the music world, or was in the music world, always thought that basically the slave culture, the culture of the black people who came into America, the gospel era, is one of the huge music influences of all the stuff we do. Soul music, rap, everything, almost most kinds of music are really hugely dominated by people with black skin or brown skin. But it doesn't mean to say I want to be black, although looking at my gorgeous suntan, you think that was one of the reasons. So, no, if you're not happy with how you look, get used to it. Get over it, for God's sakes. We look like we look. I mean, people comment that I don't have an entirely level smile. My mouth. Actually, it was because of forceps delivery. I took 3 days to emerge into this world, and the doctors finally grabbed my head with forceps and pulled me out, which meant the nerves or the muscles on one side of my upper lip are slightly dead. So as a result, I've got this rather crooked smile, which I think is very attractive. Elvis Presley spent years trying to perfect a similar look and never quite managed it. Anyway, off back to London. Bye! comfortable on the trains. You've got power, you can look at your computers. I tend to watch films, but actually also looking out of the window and seeing the fabulous views. The train service across the top of the Mediterranean from Marseille through to Nice is wonderful, and you get different views all the way up. And then, of course, you're in Paris and you move over to Eurostar and you've got views of Britain. I love train travel. It's soothing and you can do a lot, read books, eat meals and everything else. Anyway, while I'm travelling back to London, I thought you might like to have a listen to a song I wrote for an artist called Simon Turner back in the early 70s. I thought this was a great song and he made a great version of it. She was just a young girl talking about fans way back when.
I'm just a folk singer trying to get along, playing my guitar and singing of my song, sitting in a smoky club, strumming on my strings, whispering of my success and everything it brings. She was just a young girl, music in her eyes, ran away from home, came all the way to London, just because she saw my photograph. She was just a young girl, magic in her head. She was much too young for me, I had to turn my face away. I couldn't bear to say, no way, no way, no way, no way. She was just a young girl, 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 she was just a young girl. I hid back my feelings, shook my loving back. She picked up her battered suitcase, ran up the railway track. Her hair was whipping down her face, her tears were messed with rain. The witness said she never saw the train.
Oh Simon, I've loved you ever since I saw your picture, but no one understands, no one understands.
She was just a young girl, music in her eyes, ran away from home, came all the way to London, just because she saw my photograph. She was just a young girl, magic in her head. She was much too young for me, I had to turn my face away. I couldn't bear to say, no way, no way, no way, no way. Young girl, young girl, she was just a 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 young girl, she was no way, no way, no way, hey, she was no way, no way, no way, hey, she was no way, no way, no way, hey, she was no way, no way, no way, hey, she was just a young girl, she was just a young girl.
Of course, you can't write songs about young girls these days without getting into terrible trouble. People don't even admit that groupies existed, and nobody these days actually cares what teenagers are going through. Back in those days, I used to write about such things, like crying again.
When I met her, she was crying on the dance floor at the disco, with her blonde hair all disheveled and her blue eyes wet with tears. I said, what's the matter, baby? She said, hang-ups with my daddy. So I held her little white hand. She was crying again. So I took her in the rhythm of the dance floor at the disco, and we cuddled to slow dancing, and I saw a tiny smile. She was laughing, she was lovely, and she held me close beside her. Then I took her home and left her. She was crying again. They just don't understand me, only want me to reflect them, never want me to be happy. She was crying again. The next time that I saw her on the dance floor at the disco, oh, her hair was green and purple. There were pins hung in her ears. She was wearing torn blue denim and a good deal too much makeup. She was standing on her own and she was crying again. When she saw me, she was happy, took me dancing to the rhythms. Said she left her home and family and was living with a friend. But I saw her eyes too open and the bruises on her white skin. When she saw me look at her arms, she was crying again. They just don't understand me, only want me to reflect them, never want me to be happy. She was crying again. That's the last time that I saw her. Little girl of pretty 14 wondered where she could have gone to with her hang-ups and her fears, asking questions at the disco. Heard she never made the summer. When they found her in a toilet, she'd been crying again. They just don't understand me, only want me to reflect them, never want me to be happy. She was crying again. They just don't understand me, only want me to reflect them, never want me to be happy. She was crying again. She was crying again. She was crying again.
Well, that's some cheek, I can hear you say, since I go on week after week pontificating with opinions and so on. I suppose that's true to a degree, but I did want to make the point, and the reason for including Cat Stevens in my little montage there was he was one of the very few artists and songwriters in the 60s who did talk about other things. I Love My Dog, Matthew and Son, those very early tracks that he recorded that weren't about love and romance. And also one song that I knew him very well in the 60s and 70s, and he came round one day with his guitar, as he frequently did, and said, look, I want to play you a song that you're probably going to think it's absolute rubbish, but I think it really works well. I said, why do you think I think it's rubbish? I love your songs. He said, well, it's so odd, I sing it in two voices. And I said, oh, well. And so he picked up his guitar. I was the first person in the world to hear it, and sang me Father and Son in the two voices of the Father and the Son, which actually I thought was the standout moment in his Glastonbury set, which I thought he won the entire festival, as far as I could see, with all the bits I saw on television. Way, way better than Elton, who I thought was not good at all, and his voice sounded very dodgy, and he didn't look at all healthy. He was waddling around as though he'd had a hernia. Anyway, that was Glastonbury. That was my comment on lyrics and on the way the world tends to go. If this is the way the other passengers on Eurostar see me as I'm seeing them, I would have thought they might suspect that I was a serial killer. I look absolutely ghastly to other passengers. It's quite nice coming back to London. As I said, I do come back here in the middle of my breaks, at least once, sometimes twice, or even 3 times, to do bits of work and to see how the world is going, and to see various films which you can't tend to see when you're abroad. I saw the new Indiana Jones film, which I thought was fantastic. Harrison Ford was brilliant in it. That Phoebe Fleabag girl was very good indeed. I loved Toby Jones. I loved his father, Freddie Jones. I thought was a great actor. And a really good, clever script with little touches and moments. Anybody who liked the earlier Indiana Jones film will love this. Just as, and I can't work out why, I hated The Crystal Skull, which I thought was a dreadful film. It wasn't that different from this one, but it just didn't work. And it was awful. But this one, it's called, well, I can't remember what it's called, The Dial of Destiny, I think, is fantastic. Anyway, I do enjoy coming back to London for those reasons, and for other things, doing bits of work and seeing what's going on politically. Have loads of lunches with friends, some of whom have the most amazing gossip. Stephen Fry's a great source of information, and so is my old friend Paul Gambaccini. I have lunches with journalists, with editors of national newspapers, with judges, with police officers, and with friends. I thoroughly enjoy myself. And there is, of course, Wimbledon, which I enjoy every year. I'm a big Novak fan. I am actually very pro-vac. I've had 8 jabs for COVID, and I thoroughly approve of it. But I also totally disapproved of the way the media overhyped COVID and the way governments all fell for it, treating it as a plague that kills millions, as opposed to a very nasty virus that was only very dangerous to a few people, relatively. And so I supported Novak's stand against having to be vaccinated, even though I'm pro-vaccines myself. And I hated the way that he was chucked out of contests all over the world, and I love the fact that he fought back and is now the greatest of all time. I also saw Elemental, the new Pixar Disney movie, which I liked a lot. It looks fabulous, the 4 elements of earth, wind, fire and water, and I thought the script was clever and funny. Really thoroughly enjoyable, although it got several bad reviews. And the new Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, absolutely brilliant if you're a fan of Mission Impossible series and Tom Cruise, both of which I am. But even if you're not, the last 20 minutes of the film are some of the best I've ever seen. One of the things that happened in London when I was there was Pride Week, or Pride Weekend in London, which in many ways was great. Lots of people going around in silly costumes. I have to say, I had so many people come up to me and say, "Oh, you're the most original Pride wearer of all." And I was wondering why, and of course it was my cat with all the colours in the crown, all the jewels there, and they thought that was highly amusing and very Pride. I'm actually not keen on the Pride thing. I don't think we should have pride in our sexuality or our gender or anything else. We are what we are. And also, I've got to say, we fought long and hard for gay people, bisexual people, trans people, lesbians, everyone else to be accepted and treated as everyone else in the 60s and 70s. I've played you numerous of my songs like Gay Girl, I Don't Want to Be Gay, and other ones of that nature. And we got very little thanks for it in these days. People look at us and go, what were they on about? They forget that it was a crime to be homosexual. And then when they changed the law, they made it legal only if both parties were over 21, which I felt was absurd, since I'm bisexual and I could fall in love with a girl and she could fall in love with me if she was 16, no matter how old I was. But men could not fall in love with each other until they were 21. Mad. Well, it's been changed now. Apart from historically, of course, people get jammed into prison for all sorts of lies of that situation. But all in all, it's a nice position now, but I wish they could give us some credit for having changed things way back then. Anyway, there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. See you next time around for A Victim Bites Back.
out. You can stop all your yelling at me. I'm 17 and I'm tall for my age. I think with my heart and my mind's in a cage. I walk with my heels and my toes on the ground. 'Cause that's the way I found. That's the way I found. I'm gonna stop all my shouting right here now. I can see you all laughing and swilling your beer now. Tomorrow's the day that this boy is taking over. I'm pushing